It seems like what we're hearing is that there's going to be a reoccurring problem with gas wells. You cover one groundhog hole up and another one pops up. So I see your heads are shaking. So it almost seems to me that it'd be more beneficial if we purchased our own monitoring equipment so that we can notify the public and have it installed around these places. Any comments on that?
Through the chair, we've talked about monitoring of equipment. The challenge with doing that is it still doesn't take away the source of the hydrogen sulfide. It can potentially be deadly, as you're aware. We would still be in a state of being reactive and having to evacuate residents dependent on the levels of that hydrogen sulfide. So although it would give us an understanding of what the levels were at and would give us some decision making, hence we had engaged with GHD to appreciate that with our current situation or our recent situation, that wouldn't help us with solving the actual problem and stop us from having to respond in a reactive situation.
Okay, councillors, that's the end. Mayor Luke.
Do you have a motion, Mr.
I
Chair?
do not.
I'm going to move the recommendations in the report. If I can get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Do we have a seconder to the suggested motion? It has now been moved and seconded, and you now have the right to speak.
Well, I certainly have heard the comments around the floor, Mr. Chair, and I respect them, and I understand why the feelings are the way they are. As Councillor Columbus, Mr. Chair, pointed out, 17% of the gas wells of natural gas Ontario are right in the little county of Norfolk. That's almost 1 out of every 5 wells this year. So when we had 2 that gave off this gas, I think we're pretty naive to think that that's the end of it. So if another one goes, what's going to change from the way we're involved in the first 2? In all due respect to MNR, we didn't see him here at the meeting. To be quite honest with you, I don't think there was much leadership from the province at all. It's sad. I think the leadership in getting this solved out on the 10th concession was the result of leadership of the staff of this county. And whether it's an abandoned well that is up to MNRF, whether it's up to them to get that capped or not, we still have responsibilities in the way of public safety. A question through you to our county manager. We're talking about $50,000 here, 30 to 50. Be fair to say that the staff's involvement was worth a lot more than $50,000 financially. I didn't attend all of the meetings, but many of the meetings, let alone staff time that took place beyond our emergency control management meetings. Do you have any estimate, Mr. County Manager, if I may, of what these wells have cost this municipality?
We will be providing this council with a report on the actual costs I don't exactly nail that down. We're waiting to get the final bill. We're calculating the value of all the staff time, the overtime monies expended on housing individuals, on any number of items that occurred. So I don't have that number just yet, but we know we guesstimate 40,000, roughly 40,000 on the contractual direct out-of-pocket. It will not surprise me if we double that figure, and it will not surprise me if we more than double that figure, but that's a ballpark for you at this point in time. We will provide proper exact data in the future in the next 2-3 weeks.
One more question, Mr. Chair, through you to Marlene, if I may, to Marlene Miranda. It seems to me that when the province initiated some monitoring of the first well, that they abandoned and left the scene and discontinued monitoring. Is that a fair statement?
Through the chair to Mayor Luke, yes and no. So originally, Dr. Locke had requested monitoring to be done after the initial complaint from the owner-operator of the first well. So they did provide us with the reports, which did advise us that there was a significant health risk to not only the owners of that residence, but also to those in the surrounding areas. So shortly thereafter, the MOE did leave the area, but on further request, they did return. In addition to that, the Ontario Fire Marshal did come down and do some significant readings for us as well until we were able to engage through council approval of the GHD contractor, who then continued to do monitoring during the duration of the repairs and remediation of both of those respective wells.
Mr. Chair, just to close, and I'm not going to prolong this, we were faced with a very serious situation that we had, I think, as a county, very little experience in dealing with sulfur hydrate leaks from gas on private properties in our county. That was a threat, based on the government guidelines, was a threat to the health of our residences. And we have an obligation as a Board of Health and as a county, I believe, to do what we must do, because one life is worth a lot more to me than saving $30,000 to $50,000. So my question is, and if you want to leave this to budget time, so be it. If you want to vote this down and say, well, when the next well happens, and it will, are we going to call M&R and say, get on, it's not our problem? Well, I'm not going to suggest we do that if our residents' health and possible life is at risk. I don't think it's worth it. Turn our back. I think they deserve better. I think we have a serious problem here in the works, and I think we better start figuring out how we're going to get something in place to deal with this. Because right now, it's going to be on a reaction basis only. And that's fine after 1 or 2, but what do you do after 10, 12, 15, or 20? Where do we go? So, we can write all the letters we want to the Premier and get tired of getting a form letter back that just says, thank you for your letter. It's not going to get the job done. I won't argue with anyone around this table that we really don't create this problem. But we are responsible for our residents' health. In whatever form it takes, whether it's a gas that's leaking poisonous gas, whether it's an overturned tanker, whether it's a windstorm, a power outage, that is our mandate, to protect our people. Wish I had, the answer how we could get this thing addressed properly without spending money. No question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Black, followed by Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, the mayor's absolutely right. How do you look at this? And I do understand Councillor Brunton and some of the other councillors around the table. I too, over the years, have been very frustrated, as others have been, with inactivity of the province or their downloads to the municipality, not providing enough funds for a hospital and having us to step up, or medical centers, or whatever it is. These are all downloads, and you can say, yeah, it's their responsibility, and it is, but like the mayor said, will the job get done? And doubtful. So here we are, we're stuck with it, and I agree, it is our mandate, and what is our primary responsibility? It's the safety of our taxpayers, our residents here in Norfolk County. So the province may not be as close as we are, they may not be as concerned as we are, but certainly I think we in Norfolk County are concerned for the health and safety of our taxpayers and our residents here in this county. So I'm going to support the motion. I think it's the right thing to do, even though I don't like spending the money, and it's somebody else's responsibility. We should do this.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver? Councillor
Thank you,
Height after Councillor Oliver, please.
Mr. Chair, I don't have a great deal more to say. We've had a good discussion. I think what this discussion has pointed out, at least in my view, is that we already have a compelling case in this county based on the experience of the last 6 weeks and the fact that we have 17% of the wells in this whole province to go directly to the minister and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and say, you must become more proactive in assessing the wells in this county. That's why staff are recommending this report. And I guess where some of us are struggling, Mr. Chair, is that we don't feel the report can make our case any stronger than the last 6 weeks has done. And it's that I want to see put in front of the minister and the ministry and dare them to turn their backs on it. I just don't feel that this expenditure, having this work done, part of which would be on a province-wide basis, as Councillor Brunton pointed out, is going to help make our case any stronger than it is already. So again, Mr. Chair, if for whatever reason this doesn't pass, I've been drafting something that I will put forward as an alternative.
Thank you. Councillor Height?
Thank you, Chairman Wells. I won't be supporting this because I'm not going to ask the taxpayers of Norfolk County to pay twice. Once for a service that they pay for through the province and do not receive, and then again through Norfolk County. This is the province's responsibility. I appreciate that staff's bringing it forward to fix the problem. I don't think that the problem is solved. I think maybe next week we might be back in here because there's another leak down the line because the department or division that is not, or in charge of all of this, is not doing their job. That's what it boils down to. MNRF, it's your responsibility. Do your job, fix the problem, and do it right. So far, we haven't seen right. What we've seen is break, fix, stopgap, haphazard methods to do this. It's their responsibility. We pay it. I don't know what it takes to get the province to do their job, but that's how it should work, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, that finishes the speakers that we have. We have a motion on the floor. Everybody knows what the motion is. Basically, shall we spend the $30,000 to $50,000 to conduct this research in order to put us in a better position to protect our citizens? That's it in a nutshell. And question is now before you. Those in favor? I see 1, 2, and 1 is 3. Those opposed? And that motion is defeated. Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put another motion forward and see if there's any support for it. And I apologize to the Deputy Clerk, it's going to be a little bit wordy, but I'll go through it slowly. This would be my motion, Mr. Chairman. In light of the recent crisis of leaking natural gas wells in Norfolk County, and in light of the large number of natural gas wells in Norfolk County, be it resolved, or that the county requests MNRF to undertake a proactive program to assess the condition of old and abandoned natural gas wells in Norfolk County and to undertake needed monitoring and maintenance. I think that would be the end result of what we were hoping we would accomplish if we had the study in hand. It appears as though we will not do that study at this point. I think this motion, Mr. Chair, would reflect what we want to have done.
Thank you.
If there's a seconder.
And while we're looking for a seconder or whatever, the clerk here is drafting what she thought Councillor Oliver said. You can wait for that, and she will repeat it anyway, and then I'll look for a seconder. And then we'll put it on the table for discussion. So just wait until she finishes, please. Make sure you are second what you think Councillor Oliver said. I'll have you first after she reads it, Councillor Brunton. Well, as soon as we get the motion on the floor. Yeah, okay. Here's the motion as Councillor Oliver, she thinks you have put on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, that in light of the crisis of leaking natural gas wells in Norfolk County, and in light of the number of leaking gas wells in the county, that the county requests the MNRF undertake a proactive program to assess old and abandoned gas wells in Norfolk County and the needed monitoring and maintenance.
And to undertake, the needed monitoring and maintenance. And Mr. Chair, Councillor Columbus has reminded me that we should have also had this go to the Premier as well as Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, for example.
You'll include that. All right, so the motion now, I need a seconder, and that is you, Councillor Brunton. You are seconding that motion. Yes, you may.
Okay, sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll support the motion, and I just wanted to ask if we could amend the motion to include all our costs to date be forwarded to the province for a recovery, if possible. And I don't know when Mr. Cribbs will have that information, but I think we should send that off and say, we corrected your problem with a lot of our staff time, whatever it may be, and that we'd like our money back. As Councillor Height said, we're paying twice if we don't. Thank you.
Just before I ask the county manager, are you willing to put that as part of the
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, I appreciate what the councillor is saying, but I think it would cloud the issue too much. I think as part of our preamble in whatever letter we send, it would be my hope we would identify to the ministry how much we did spend on this crisis that we've just gotten through. But I don't think it would be, I'm sorry, but I don't think it would be appropriate to have that as part of this motion. I think it's two separate things.
A separate motion and would be in order?
Sure.
Well, Mr. Cribbs indicated it could be as high as $80,000 we've spent out there, and I'd like to see us recover it, but I'll support your motion. Thank you.
Without your add-on. All right, let's deal with the motion that's on the floor, and then you have every right then to put a second motion on the floor. Fair enough? Speaking to the motion, Councillor Columbus.
Well, I know Councillor Oliver mentions the word leaking, but should we not put something in there, an adjective of, say, about the hydrogen sulfide or something dangerous to the human health? Or like gas wells can leak anything. Sometimes it's dangerous, sometimes it may not be dangerous.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I would have no problem with that as a friendly amendment, but again, it would be my hope it would be part of the preamble in what the mayor is ultimately asked to send, that staff would highlight those details and the health hazard to the families that were affected by the crisis and that sort of thing.
Councillor Columbus, are you finished with that?
Right, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to have the county manager speak, and then I'm going to have the clerk speak, and then we'll see where we go. County manager, please.
This will not be a form letter, since we are seeking more than a form response. So I'd like to suggest to council you're being quite clear now, and you don't need to spend too much time wordsmithing the exact motion, because we will draft actual original text around and indicate that it's an important document as opposed to generic form government-to-government communication. And we will be providing you with a future report that will quantify the quantums, but at this point in time, I would suggest that Councillor Oliver's approach might behoove Norfolk County the best, so as to have a health and safety issue, and later on we'll have a separate monetary discussion, some of which we'll give to you likely in camera to make a number of decisions. So it's premature at this point in time because we can't quantify just yet, and you have to make some decisions before we can sort out how to do that exactly. And that'll be 2, 3, 4 weeks at the most down the line.
And it is, as it is now, in Councillor Oliver's motion, there is no mention of compensation. Okay. And who seconded that motion? You did. So you're all right to leave it the way it is for the time being? All right. Any further questions before we call the question? All right. Seeing none, do you want the motion read? Nobody wants it read? All in favor of the motion, the unread motion? I think that is carried unanimously. All right. Councillor Height, please.
The money issue, Mr. Chair. I'm still looking to send an invoice over to MNRF for the work that we did. So I think if I could ask the county manager when he would think he would have the bill ready.
So if I understand you correctly, when the county manager brings forth that report, that you intend to put forth a motion that we send the bill to the province.
That's right, and I'd like to write it in my calendar.
I mean, I don't know when that would be.
In fairness, I'm suggesting 2, 3, or 4 weeks because we're depending on a number of actions from third parties over whom I exercise no control. And until they make, amongst other things, submit invoices to us, I don't know how I can come up with that figure for you. That being said, finance is ably tracking the expenses we've incurred. We have to wait for one more payroll to go through to have all of the numbers. So I also need time to pass, hence 2, 3, or 4 weeks, but it will come in relative short order.
We'll be billing our usual 15% interest, I trust?
Well, criminal interest is 32% under the code, so 31 seems reasonable.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton, you had a comment to make on this?
Just further to the motion we just passed, and did I understand the county manager to say that he would be wording things a little bit different? Would you be advising him that there will be something forthcoming? Not an amount, but something that will be I mean, wouldn't that be wise or no?
It would be my advice to this council that we keep the issues separate. You have a very clear motion. At the moment, what we should address are valid and very real health and safety concerns. Since we don't have the data, I also think it's best to have a separate conversation about money and monetary compensation, and frankly, it's just premature now, because we just don't know what the numbers are. We will be reporting them to you, but at this point in time, I think it's best to just look at our obligations, or what we feel are our moral obligations with respect to health and safety, and have that conversation alone, and then look at the financial repercussions in a month or less.
Okay. Any further discussion on this topic? If not, let us go to our next item on the agenda, which is staff report, proposed amendment to vacancy rebate program. And whomever staff wishes to bring this to us, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce Sue Bugner to do the preliminary introduction to this report, and I'm sure she would be able to entertain any questions the council has regarding to the vacancy rebate new legislation that is coming.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a brief summary of the report. I know it's rather long. The Municipal Act requires every municipality has a program to provide tax rebates for commercial or industrial properties that are taxed as occupied but have vacancies of 90 or more days in a year. In Norfolk, the vacancy rebate percentage applied to both commercial and industrial property is 33%. Property owners are required to submit applications by February 28th in the year following the taxation year that the application pertains to. Vacancy rebate programs have been in place in Ontario since the 1990s. Over the years, several municipal and business stakeholders have raised concerns with the Ministry of Finance about the appropriateness of the lower tax level provided through these programs and any unintended implications the programs may have for local economies. In response to municipal concerns, the province initiated a review of vacancy programs in 2015, and in December 2016, through Bill 70, provided options for municipalities to change or eliminate their vacancy programs. Both council resolution and approval from the Ministry of Finance by regulation are required. Some of the challenges and considerations of the current vacancy program are that it's application-based and requires considerable administration by staff. It's a tax relief benefit only provided to commercial and industrial properties. It can discourage filling vacancies or development of property. In many cases, revised assessment values of these buildings will factor the impact of vacancies, thereby already resulting in lower annual taxes. And the lost tax revenue impacts all taxpayers. The average cost of the vacancy rebate program in Norfolk County from 2012 to 2016 was $77,000 per year. The Ontario Business Improvement Association is supportive of the changes in the vacant unit tax rebate program to promote investment in local downtowns and encourage full occupancy in non-residential buildings. A recent poll conducted by the regional and single-tier treasurers indicated that most municipalities intend to eliminate the vacancy rebate program either immediately or by phasing it out. This report proposes elimination of the current vacancy program through a 3-year phase-out beginning in 2018. allowing time for affected property owners to prepare for any financial impacts. The following schedule is proposed. For applications processed in 2018 based on the 2017 taxation year, the rebate will remain at 33%. For applications processed in 2019 based on 2018 taxes, the proposed rebate would be 16.5%. In 2020, the rebate would be fully removed. It's anticipated that elimination of the vacancy rebate program will provide an incentive to affected property owners to develop underutilized buildings, leading to increased occupancy or active uses, leading to increased economic development and future property taxes. Staff is seeking approval in principle to phase out the current program. Staff is also requesting direction to engage the local business community for feedback. This is an exercise that the province requires. Feedback collected during the engagement process will be provided to Council for consideration before the end of the year, when Council will be asked to make a final decision to phase out the current program. Should Council approve to change the current program, the Minister of Finance would be notified before the end of 2017, so changes could be effective January 1st, 2018. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, we just happen to have a few for you, starting with Councillor Height, followed by Councillor Columbus, followed by Councillor Black, followed by Mayor Luke, followed by Councillor Brunton. All right, why don't we start with you, Councillor Height?
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Through you to the tax collector, how many properties are we talking here to take advantage of this program?
Through the chair to Councillor Height, I'm sorry I left that data downstairs. I did do a bit of analysis a while back, and I am going to estimate that there's probably 50 to 60 applications processed per year.
Okay, thank you. And then, normally I would be in favor of public consultation, but what do you really hope to accomplish with that? Because it's a 3-year phase-in, and within 3 months you're going to make up that decision and have to do a report and go through all that.
Through the chair to Councillor Height, it is a requirement of the Ministry of Finance to go through an exercise to make sure that it's communicated to the community. So it's a requirement, and that's why staff's suggesting that it take place.
Okay, and could you describe that process to me? Will it be like a single town hall meeting, or are we just going to tag that on to the community hub presentations that are going out right now?
Through the chair to Councillor Height, what I suggested in the report was direct communication with the local BIAs, Chamber of Commerce, Board of Trade, through just a letter communication, or speak to them if they request that, and otherwise advertise a sort of a town hall public open house meeting for the business community.
Sure.
You're more than welcome. Councillor Columbus, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to see that you
Our
are...
meeting's not over yet, you can't leave. Go ahead. These rookies.
Pleased to see that you're going to be inviting the BIA, the Chamber of Commerce's, and the Boards of Trade to a joint group meeting. But in the end, how do you feel these new rules will affect the downtown cores? Will they enhance the downtown cores in the business district or industrial area, or will it go the opposite way? Do we know? Like, what may happen is people that own these buildings may decide that, if I'm going to be paying full taxes on this down the road, I'm going to unload it, and someone else may buy that building, and it could either go in further disregard, or it could be improved significantly. Any idea of what's happened in other areas where they do charge a full tax?
Through the chair to Councillor Columbus. We can't predict the future. Any number of possibilities is there, but it does promote that if you're going to pay full tax, that perhaps there'd be some more effort to fill that vacant storefront, get some rent in to help pay for that, or perhaps sell the building, get out of the business altogether. So it is our hope, and it is the hope of the Ontario BIA Association, that it will promote filling the vacancies rather than have a negative effect.
Finish, Councillor Columbus. Councillor Black, please.
Yes, Chairman Wells, thank you very much. And I've had some personal experience with this program. Owned property in the downtown for, I can't believe it, 38 years. And only one time did I experience a problem with trying to get a tenant. And I did participate in the program, and it was helpful. I think maybe 6 months or something like that. But certainly, I did not want to leave that property empty because that meant money out of my pocket. It was worth a lot more for me to rent it. But having said that, I've also been on the founding member of the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association, was on that organization for a number of years, and listened to some of the concerns of some of the larger communities in Hamilton or Toronto, where more industrial buildings, they were definitely abusing it. And I think that this is where this is coming from. So I'm just wondering if, with this review, maybe there's a different way to make it more legitimate. Maybe it could be, because I think there is a legitimacy to it. It's just that in some instances it is or may be abused. Would there be a possibility of rolling this type of program over into the community improvement plan to make it more of an incentive than the way it is now? Is that a possibility?
Through the chair to Councillor Black, anything that council directs is a possibility. That would transfer the function, I believe, from the finance department to development and cultural services. But if council directs staff to do some research in that respect, certainly we can, but it doesn't come without a cost as well. And what elimination of the program does see a positive impact on the levy by reducing that expense.
Well, certainly, I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say through the public consultation. And I think we need that feedback from the chambers, the BIAs, and the commercial sector in Norfolk County. So I look forward to that and participating in that. So that's why I'm supporting the motion.
County manager wishes to respond as well.
This recommendation from the finance policy would bring Norfolk County in line with the best practices being adopted in the vast majority of municipalities with downtown cores in the province of Ontario. The philosophy for the past 2 decades plus has been to have a rebate for vacant properties to help distressed landlords in times of need. It's been a well-intentioned philosophy that worked to an extent. Now, in 2017, though, it is thought that that benefit has run its course entirely, and that what is needed now, and it is the collective wisdom of this policy change has happened as a result of the province of Ontario and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs doing a widespread consultation, and this is the end result. And it is believed that what is now needed is to end any economic incentive to have a vacant storefront, and if the existing landlord cannot make a go of it, to sell that property to someone who thinks that he or she can. So it's the exact opposite, that we've come full circle and we've helped as much as we can for distressed landlords, and to take away the incentive to maintain ownership, if you cannot find a way to make a go of it, then to sell it to some third party to get economic activity occurring. So all that consultation has happened. This finance department has been to multiple seminars, has looked through the legislation, has adopted the very best practices of other places, and this is the very best advice we can give you, to be abundantly clear.
Mayor Luke.
Mr. Chair, just through you to Sue, it's your intent if this recommendation is approved that you will consult with the business community and suggest your plan to cut the 33% in half in 2019 and then in 2020 eliminate it. So we're not making that decision tonight. That's just the approach you will lead you into the discussions. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Mayor Luke, yes, it's just direction to go and participate, to have that community discussion, and then to bring back any feedback. At this point, I would be recommending phase out of the program later in the year, but for now, it's just to adopt in principle in order for staff to go ahead to bring back.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, indeed, we need the public consultation on this matter and need to direct staff to get on with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, you're the last speaker so far.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question through you to Sue, I guess. And I too have experienced the program through a corporation that we own, and it's been very beneficial at times. But I look at it, and contrary to what county manager says, sometimes through no fault of their own, the people in the downtown core, I'm sure some cases would like to sell their property, but sometimes it's not that easy. My other concern is, have you looked at, Sue, the amount, if we were collecting that 33% right now in Norfolk County, do you have a dollar value right there on the top of your head, approximate that what we would be benefiting?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton, the cost of the program annually, this year's budget, I think, was $87,000. So if we plan that it costs us $87,000 in rebates, that would be $87,000 that we would otherwise have. The property is fully taxed, and then a rebate of 33% is given out. So we expect that $87,000 is the cost of all the applications. So $87,000 would be back on the levy.
And that's the tax amount, though.
That's the full tax rebate.
Okay, so, and that's right across Norfolk County?
It's available to all commercial or industrial properties in the county.
And I look at some places, like on 2nd Avenue, where there's some big industrial places that I'm not sure if they're benefiting now from the program, or I don't want to name them, but there's some big industrial places up there that I believe are closed completely. And I just wonder, like, if this program went through, you're saying we would tax those properties at the full value if they are applying now for the rebate. Am I on course with that, or am I?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton, yes, they would be fully taxed, and it's been my experience that there's relatively low, maybe one or two industrial. Normally the applicants are all commercial.
These would be industrial, I'm talking.
Yeah, and the applications don't show that many apply for this.
Okay.
So they would be fully taxable. What this doesn't eliminate is the tax class for vacant land or vacant property. So there could be a component of a factory or a business, say the parking lot or a grassy area, that could be assessed as vacant land, vacant industrial land, and
Right.
it still would be calculated at the lower rate, where the occupied portion would be full rate.
Right. Okay, I'm just trying to, so there may be properties out there that aren't taking advantage of it right now. Is that safe to say?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton, I would say yes. And there's others that maybe the turnover of tenants happens a lot, but it happens several times through the year, but there's no 90 consecutive days of vacancy, which they require to be able to apply. So they may go through a number of tenants, but they don't bother to apply.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at more, there's a few industrial places that I'm starting to wonder if they've even taken advantage of it, so, thank you.
Councillor Columbus, please.
Mr. Chairman, what convinces me most to support this report, it says here on page 2 of 6 at the bottom that 40% of the applicants have applied for a vacancy rebate in at least 3 of the 5 years. It's pretty significant. Do you have a mover for this recommendation?
Councillor Height is going to move when you stop speaking.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Height, please.
I move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
And you'd like to second it now, Councillor Columbus? We have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. That brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is notice of consultation, draft updated Long Point Regional Conservation Source Protection Plan. Who is doing this? Mr. Baird and Miss, what, it's so long since I've seen you, Miss Elder, welcome back.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Your principal planner, Mary Elder, is going to present this report. She is our resident expert on this, and I know she'll do a good job and answer your questions. So,
I am convinced she will do well as well. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought council and committee would find it easiest if I present this as a PowerPoint presentation rather than trying to describe the differences that are upcoming. So I was here in August to talk with you about water quantity policies. So we had done some scientific research, and consultants were involved, and the source protection staff as well at the Grand River Conservation Authority in Long Point, and they indicated the following results. So that there was a significant water quantity risk for Simcoe and a requirement for policies. You saw those draft policies in August. There were new wells done for Delhi, and when they were doing this, they had some new science, so an improved Tier 3 groundwater model that they could use to update the wellhead protection areas. There was also a decommissioned well in the northwest part of Simcoe, so again, they used this new model to update the wellhead protection area. For Cedar Street and Chapel Street wells and Waterford, there weren't any infrastructure changes, but they used the new model. And it's made changes to the wellhead protection areas. And then finally, the other indication was that the assessment report updates were needed because now they had this new mapping. So I thought I'd show you first of all the draft map that would be included in the source protection plan and consequently later on in our Norfolk County official plan. The purple area is the area which is considered the areas for those wells at Cedar Street and Chapel Street in Simcoe, the areas of concern for water quantity. So that's the mapping that I don't think I had previously when I brought the policies to you in August. When the policies were taken to the Source Protection Committee on the 7th of September, they did take out in the second line there, it used to read to ensure that any increase or new consumptive water taking serviced by a well located within a wellhead protection area for quantity, so that would be our Simcoe wells, that it never becomes a drinking water threat. What they've done is they've taken out those words serviced by a well located so that it reads as you see on your slide in front of you now, that it's just water taking within a wellhead protection area where quantity is of an issue. I don't know all the science behind that part. If you've got questions, we might have to ask Ms. Robinson about that. So I thought the best thing to do was to show you, this is the Cedar Street and Chapel Street wells, and this is the draft mapping. The consultation that's being proposed for this fall, this is the map that people would see. And then the next slide shows you what it was before. So you can see there's quite a difference there, which immediately, to my mind, thinking says, how are we going to tell these people? This is something that staff is already working on to come up with a program in contacting people to let them know that they were part of a wellhead protection area before, things have changed, or they become part of it now. So that's part of this whole consultation that will take place this fall. The issue contributing area for nitrates, this is the draft map that they intend to include in the updated Long Point Protection Plan. This is what we currently have. So again, it's come down in size, taken a little bit different shape. The northwest well from Simcoe that has been deleted would be in this area here, and you see that that's gone now. So our next map, you see what currently is now, shows that, whoops, I did the wrong thing. This is now gone, so that's why the shape has changed, besides using the up-to-date model. With Delhi, we've added wells 3 and 4 at the south end of the first 2 wells, and so that has changed the wellhead protection area there. It used to look like this. So quite a significant change there. This is the Waterford well as wellhead protection areas as they're proposing to have it. And again, this is reduced from what we had before. So the science has been improved. Again, I don't know all the technicalities about how they've improved it, but I'm sure that those scientists know what they're doing. Finally, we did notice one thing. Actually, it was when I was talking about our upcoming official plan and zoning amendments for the source protection plan, that we have a policy in the plan currently that talks about if you're locating a replacement or a new septic system, that it has to be located outside of an area that is a significant drinking water threat. But in fact, there are possibly some small residential lots where it's not possible to locate it outside of. So this seems to be overly restrictive policy. So we're recommending that we add the words "where possible," as I've indicated in underline and bold there. So the recommendation that I'm asking you to support tonight, because the message from the Grand River Conservation Authority source protection staff was that they needed a recommendation from council supporting pre-consultation this fall. The Clean Water Act requires this before they can go out for consultation. So that's the third recommendation that's here on your the sheet in front of you right now. The consultation is to take place from October 9th until October the 15th, and then to go forward to any comments will go forward to the Source Protection Committee, and with their appropriate discussions and so on, then they'd make changes and send it off to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which would mean we could have a revised, new and improved source protection plan next spring. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Elder. We'll start with Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Mary, for your report. Just for council's information, I hope you remember getting a little memo from me about 10 days or so ago on this topic, and that was before I realized Mary was coming with her report as quickly as she was. The essence of that, and this is something that I got as a result of the Source Protection Committee meeting a few weeks ago, just summarizing the number of individual property parcels affected by the new wellhead protection area configuration versus the one they did back in 2010, using as what Mary would describe as the old science. And in most cases, there will actually be slightly fewer properties affected, but potentially more activities within those properties that might be considered to be a drinking water threat. So it was important for all of us as council members, and again, appreciate Mary's report, that we have a heads up that they will be sending these letters out to property owners probably this fall. And typically, people don't really understand the implications of some of this, and I've suggested before that the policies that we're going to have to use in our source protection plan for Norfolk and in our OP are relatively easy for people to accept, because they will be consultation, this idea of making where possible the relocation of a septic system if it has to be a new one, for example, or a replacement. So I think our staff have done the best job that they can. This is really not much different than the number of properties, et cetera, that were proposed to be affected when the source protection plan first came out 3 or 4 years. I hope Mary would agree with me on that in terms of geography and property boundaries. So that's just an FYI, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none? Councillors? Councillor Columbus.
So move the recommendation.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded by Councillor Black. Any further debate? Seeing none? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to our next item on the agenda, item number 9. Madam Deputy Clerk, you wish to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Council Services Division would like to extend our apologies. A motion to reconsider should technically be on a council agenda. I spoke with Councillor Wells, as this is his motion, and we've agreed that it'll go on the September 26th agenda.
All right, we don't need to debate that any further. That brings us to the next notice of motion. I think that is you, Councillor Height. Do you wish to speak to that? Oh, Councillor Black. Well, I gave you credit. You're always speaking. Councillor Black,
Right
please.
now, Mr. Chair.
No, I think it's self-explanatory. We'll discuss it at that time. It's just requesting an update on some information.
Okay, thank you very much. That then brings us to other business. Councillor Brunton, other business, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few items here. One is in the...
Well, we're going to miss you then. We'll come back. Go ahead.
All right, start off with on the information package. I think the first one was kind of answered by Councillor Oliver. The next one is page 14 in our information package, Gary Houghton's memorandum regarding the wastewater treatment facility in Simcoe. And I was wondering, Lee, if you could tell me, the way I read that, I'm a little confused. Is it the 21,500,000 is the current budget, or is that the anticipated budget? I'm not clear on that.
Through the chairman to council, the purpose of that memo was a heads up, we're waving a flag, something's not looking right. We're at the very preliminary stages. The estimate that the engineer had provided us to date at the very beginning of this project is approximately $21.5 million. We're giving you the heads up. There's not sufficient current money to do that. We will continue to work with the engineer, and as we go further along in the project, we'll be able to refine our numbers much more. We're looking for cost savings, but we're giving you the heads up that something will be coming forward because we're struggling with the amount of money that would needed to be spent, and council will need to make a decision once we have additional information. So again, the purpose of this was to let you know, I think council knows I try to operate off the no surprises rule. And so when this came to us, we wanted to give you the heads up that we're currently working on something because it's not looking quite right to us. And we will be bringing something forward for council's consideration once we have more refined information and we're actually able to pinpoint some of the information better. And clearly, this far exceeds the available funds and something we can't proceed with until we've had some serious discussions at council with respect to it.
Okay, and on that same note, I was under the understanding that we have spent a lot of money up there in recent years, and I'm not that long ago, but am I correct on that we have spent considerable funds up there?
Through the chairman to council, we have spent some money with respect to that. None of the stuff that we're looking at spending on has been touched in probably the last 25 to 30 years. So they didn't do a complete overhaul of the facility. They only worked on parts of it historically, and so this is the rest of the facility.
Okay, and I guess my next question on the same issue to James is, of that 21 million, how much was that anticipated to be debentured, roughly?
Through the chair, I would have to double check. However, with this project, I believe we debentured most of it because of the significance of the dollar amount.
So none of that 21 million has yet to be debentured?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. I do have a couple of other ones here.
You have the floor. You just go right ahead.
All right.
Oh, just excuse me before
Okay.
you go there. I think Councillor Height, you had a question on this?
Yep.
I
Sorry
did too, if
about
that's permissible, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
I'm sorry?
That's permissible, I can speak to this, or ask questions?
You can ask a question.
Okay. Through you to Public Works, you mentioned that we don't like surprises. Well, I fell out of my chair when I read that it was going to be double the budget. How can things be so badly done that it is double the budget? Like, this is $10 million.
Through the chairman to council, the reasoning for what we're struggling with is that they have found additional things as they're starting to do their work that we were not made aware of. We didn't want to wait until we had very detailed information and we were much further down the process before we let council know that we've got some concerns. We're concerned about this project and that we'll be bringing back a lot more detailed information once we have that information. I think it's also important to note with respect to this that some of it, for example, the biosolids implementation, does extend to other service areas outside of Simcoe, but typically Simcoe's sort of the hub for it. So there are benefits to some of the other facilities. So it's not just all of the project doesn't just service Simcoe. That being said, we were just as taken back as council was with respect to some of the cost estimates that we're now seeing, which is why we're bringing it forward, letting you know that we're doing further investigation and trying to figure it out and move it forward.
You know, is the need for this wastewater treatment facility in Simcoe, is it because of the growth, the development?
Through the chairman to council, some of it is growth related and some of it is purely operational. Some of the project is funded through development charges because it has a significant growth component as well.
We're doing a development charges study that's coming fairly soon, so will that be tied into this? Because taxpayers shouldn't be paying for the growth.
Again, this is a wastewater treatment facility, so there is no tax component to this project. It is rate funded. So it's, just so that everybody's clear, there isn't a tax component to it. It is rate funded. You are correct. We can retroactively put projects and different cost estimates back into the development charges study. I believe the development charges study is due for review. I'm going to say it's late 2018 or 2019. Oh, James is saying no, so I'll let James tell you what the date is.
Familiar with the date. We've discussed that already. It's coming sooner. All right.
Through the chair, if Councillor Height is meaning we're going to be doing a development charge study this fall, he is correct. With the reserve report that went in July, that was one of the recommendations the council approved, is to get a DC study done ahead of the regular schedule in order to incorporate projects into it that perhaps wasn't incorporated before.
And while you're going over this stuff and the needs for the water and wastewater for the ratepayers, will you be also incorporating some of the asset management plan recommendations? Or will they need to be updated as well? Because I don't believe that they picked up on this $10,000 hit.
Through the chairman, I don't think you meant $10,000, but.
I was putting flowers on it.
Some of the asset management doesn't necessarily look at the development needs, it looks at the current facility. And so they may not have been aware of some of this as well. When we do the development charges background study, we look at all different things that'll incorporate the integrated sustainable master plan as well as the more detailed information we have on all of our facilities as a result of development.
Okay, but I guess my concern is that the asset management plan or the integrated sustainable master plan has $10 million gotchas in it as well if it can happen to here. And that's where my concern is, especially because we just did both of those studies. And here we are with a glitch.
Through the chairman to council, I don't think it's possible, like the purpose of an integrated sustainable master plan is not to do a detailed process review of the facility. It's to look at things in a holistic fashion in the best way to service it. I don't think you can use the integrated sustainable master plan and saying that the details of the project weren't identified through that. They're not the same. They don't look at the same stuff, nor from an asset management point of view do they get into is the transformer going to go in the next year? Do we have hydro servicing issues at the site? Those are ones that are identified through this sorts of things, and that's why we've brought this forward.
Right, but the AMP does state what are the upgrades in our capital plan over the next 10 years. That's part of the whole idea behind it. And then here we are coming in at double the budget for something we need. I'm concerned that there's some other double budget items down the road.
With respect to that, they don't do that. An asset management plan doesn't do that level of a detailed review with respect to the facility. They do a preliminary review, but as I said, nobody was aware of some of these issues until the engineer started working on the system, and that's why we're bringing it forward, because it's a shock to us as well. It's not something that was ever anticipated until they got into the detailed work, and that's what we're trying to resolve at this point.
It's a shock. Thank you. Okay, where are we going here now? Back to you. There we go. I knew you wouldn't forget.
No, you're right, it won't. Back, just on this issue, Lee, and I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, if it would be possible when we do our rate-supported budget, if we could get a little more, just a brief update. It's hard to keep track of, the Waterford Waste Treatment Plant,